Hello, my name's Jim Wade, and I'm a tax attorney here in Maine. And we're going to be talking about tax train wrecks. It's a new thing I'm trying out. And we're talking today about the case of the scammed senior. This is a client. I just got a very good resolution for her, and I thought I would share her story to go through, how we deal with tax problems. What's our method, and how do we try to get people to a better place? Can't always promise that it'd be, selling it for pennies on the dollar, but we can promise that what we're going to do is get you the most permanent solution possible to get the IRS out of your life. So in this particular case, this person came to me with a serious problem. And I'll get into the details of it in a moment, but she had been scammed by someone overseas who convinced her to turn, her assets into cryptocurrency and give it to them for safekeeping. And what it ended up doing is generating a tax debt because she liquidated a retirement account. So when she came to me, she was in a very seriously bad place. So without further ado, let's get into some more details about this. So she calls me up, tells me her tale, and it is an awful one. She was convinced to convert her liquid assets, around $400,000, to cryptocurrency and send it to someone for safekeeping, quote unquote. And this took 6 weeks. One can always say, well, you should have known better, but really, it sounded to me like they gave her such a convincing story, and they built up fear, so much fear in her mind. It just overcame her sense, and only later did she go, oh my God, I'm being scammed. At which point it was too late. She did report to the police. Police did try to trace the cryptocurrency, but eventually it ended up overseas somewhere, at which point there's very little chance they're going to get the money back. But adding insult to injury, and why she came to me, is that she had about a $60,000 tax bill due on the amount of money she took out of her retirement account. And now, not only has she lost all of her money, she owes the government. Now the government's chasing after, looking for to get paid. As you can expect, that was just horrifying to her. She told me that she felt so bad. There were times that she wished she were dead. That's how bad it was. And it just seemed like it was like being re-victimized all over again. Now, in the IRS's defense, most of this is done by automated collection notices. It's not like there's somebody at the IRS who's actively seeking to torture her, but it's just the way it works. But for her perspective, it was awful. Now, she had very little left over. I think she maybe had $30,000, $40,000 of assets that weren't in her home, as far as equity in her home. And, that was all she had to pay her living expenses. And she'd been living at home since the 80s. I think it was her parents' house and she inherited it. She had about $200,000 in equity, but to pay the $60,000 was going to essentially wipe her out as far as her cash flow. She was on Social Security. She's not making a lot of money. She can't pay her regular expenses. Before it wasn't a big deal. She could just tap into her retirement or other savings. Now it's all gone. Whatever she had in the bank and what's left over for her, like there was a small retirement account, that's it. She's not getting anything more. So it was a real problem. So I sat down with her and we went over her situation. So I laid out her options to her. I said, look, putting aside what you feel should happen here are your options. Because she just wanted to settle it. This should be forgiven, should be settled, it should go away, etc., etc. I said, that isn't going to happen. But here are your options. Your first option is pay it. Whether you pay it now or pay it over time, but you can pay it. And when I say you can pay it, I don't mean that she necessarily can't afford it, but that's her option. She could make payments towards it. She could try to settle it. The problem with settling it is that the normal technique of doing that is you say, Dear IRS, I have less assets and available income to pay this tax debt in full. I can't pay it in full. So will you accept something less? Here, she owed $60,000, but she had $200,000 in equity in a house. Now, granted, it's not cash, but the IRS believes that whether it's something you can turn into cash now or later, if the value is more than the tax debt, you're not going to settle it, at least under the normal rules. There is, however, what they call an offer to settle for effective tax administration. That means there's some sort of public policy reason why the IRS should take less than what it could get. For example, I need it for medical. I have, serious cancer. Every dollar bill I have is going to go towards treatments. I have a disabled child. We've got to put a ramp on the house. We've got to get, nurses. It's got to be a significant issue in your life where that money should go first, not to taxes, but to medical and other sorts of things where it's important, obviously where you don't become a ward of the state, I guess the best way to say it. And, she has a good case. I mean, $4,000 going overseas and your ability to pay for your expenses is at risk now without liquidating everything you have. Problem is, in America, I would say out of maybe 20 million people who owe to the IRS, the total number of effective tax administration offers accepted is probably less than 30. I think I saw one number was like 18, another one was like 27. The IRS doesn't really have great statistics on that, but it's very few. It's very few. And I talked to someone like a week or two after her. These people didn't hire me, but they had they were scammed out of $1.5 million. They generated a $200,000 tax debt. The husband has dementia, and I think they have enough money where they could pay it in full. If I had to stack those two against each other, the other couple's got to get it. It's just their situation so much worse because now that he has dementia, he's going to go right straight to the, memory facility to have someone take care of him. It's awful, but very few people get it. And I think probably why they didn't hire me is I told them the same thing I told her, which is you ain't going to settle it. It just isn't going to happen unless you've got some severely bad facts. But all hope is not lost. And that's why it pays to have somebody who spends a lot of time doing this, is that you do have the option of requesting hardship status. Hardship status means your income isn't enough to cover your current expenses, including current taxes. Now, the equity in the home is an issue. We'll get to that in a moment, but certainly she looked like she might qualify for hardship. So I sat down, I talked to her about her options, and she said, look, I want to settle it. I want this gone. It's causing me sleepless nights. It's making me miserable. It kills me every time I think about it. I said, look, it's unlikely you're going to get a settlement. And I went through everything I just told you. And I said, but there's hardship status. We might be able to get that. And if we can, it doesn't make the tax debt go away, but the IRS has 10 years to collect on a tax debt. That 10-year clock keeps ticking down. And you'll be in hardship status, if your situation doesn't change, probably all through it. So you might get a settlement there without actually going and trying to settle it. So we had a lot of back and forth about it. She eventually agreed with me and said, okay, do it. Let's try it. So I called the IRS, and it was like 2 days, 3 phone calls. It was very annoying, but the first 2 people gave me some grief about the equity in the home. But thankfully, the phone disconnected on the second guy. And when I called back and spoke to a third person, she was a lady. I think, God bless her soul, I think she heard the story. She understood what I was getting at with this client. That when you have someone who's over 65, her only income is Social Security, she has maybe $20,000, $30,000 of assets that she could use for expenses before she has to start tapping into the house. Who knows what's going to come on down the road. If the IRS insists that she borrow against the property to pay it off, it further deepens her hole every month when she's got to pay her bills. It was an intractable problem. The IRS agent says, look, I understand, $400,000 going overseas, it's all you have, except for this small amount. You may need that to get you through the next couple, the next 5, 10 years. We'll put you in hardship status. Tell you what, it was a very nice call I had with her after I got off the phone with the IRS. Obviously 10 years is a long time. IRS would file a lien to protect its interest, meaning she's going to get, notices about that. So it's not going to be easy, but at least she now has the potential to have this forgiven in 10 years when it expires. It was the best option for her under the circumstances. But what makes us good, though, is with IRS, typically, if something changes, we could always try again. But she's protected. IRS isn't going to take her stuff, and she can sort of do the best that she can right now. So with that, if you or someone you know has a situation like that, have them call somebody who knows, the ins and outs of dealing with the IRS, because you've got to understand the person's options, be able to give them the pros and cons, and get them into an option that solves their problem once and for all. I know a lot of people watch the TV and radio ads where they see all these people settling their tax debts for pennies on the dollar, and so their default is always settle, settle, settle. Unfortunately, it's not that common, but there are other options where you can get as close to your goal as possible. So with that, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. And if you need to contact us, there's our contact information right there.